So, we as a society, we are more committed to supremacy than democracy. I heard Michelle Norris say that, I think on MSNBC today. And let me say this plainly: what happened today didn't just come out of nowhere. If you don't know what I'm talking about what the Supreme Court did, and I'll get more to that in a minute. What happened today did not just come out of nowhere. This has been building for decades. And I remember several years ago when I was in my 20s, people telling me that they were worried about this, and I didn't understand why they would be so worried because I actually believed that this was more secure. And as I got older, particularly after 2013, no more. Anyway, um, this has been building for over a decade. So in 2013, in in Shelby County versus Holder, the Supreme Court removed federal oversight of voting laws. States with a history of discrimination no longer had to get approval before changing the rules. That was a guardrail. Um, and so those states were southern states. In 2019, in Rucho versus Common Cause, the court said the court said federal courts could not step in. It's Susan. Susan, my dog is like scratching the door. Hold on. Oh my God. Come on. Okay. All right. I'm back now. I'm going to start over. Oh God. Okay. All right. I'm going to start over now. Here we go. Okay. So what happened today did not just happen out of nowhere. This has been building for over a decade. In 2013, Shelby County versus Holder, the Supreme Court removed federal oversight of voting laws. So states that had a history of discrimination, southern states, no longer had to get approval before changing their maps or their rules. That was put in place as a guardrail, and the Supreme Court took it away. And then in 2019, in Rucho versus Common Cause, the court said federal courts could not step in to stop partisan gerrymandering, giving states cover to use party as a proxy for race. So um, states could gerrymander as long as it was not about race. It could be they could gerrymander based on political affiliation. And then 2021, um, Bronovich, I think I'm saying that right, versus the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, the court made it harder to prove discrimination in voting laws. And then today in Louisiana versus Calais, it went after what the last guardrail, making it harder to challenge maps that dilute Black voting power. So in the previous case, people could still bring racial discrimination cases to the Supreme Court related or to the court and gerrymandering if it was proven, I think, that race was a factor, that Black people are or racial minorities were being diluted. But today, the last guardrail of the Voting Rights Act has been completely stripped away. So we have a law that has no power. Um, and so what we are seeing today did not just happen today. It was piece by piece by piece by piece. It is the result of a coordinated, decades long decades long dismantling, piece by piece, protection by protection. First, they removed oversight, and then they closed the courts, and then they weakened the law, and now they are following all of what all they were howling. Now they were howling. I can't read my notes. Howling out what remains. And I want to be clear about what this means. Black and brown communities will lose representation. And when you lose representation, you lose power. And they know that. When you lose representation, you lose power. You lose power over healthcare, housing, education, policing, survival. This is not abstract. This is harm, direct harm that's going to be caused to Black and brown and other racialized minorities or any minority, because now states can dilute voting power of anybody. They can remove completely the will of the people. People died. People died for the right to vote. I want to be clear about that. Not long ago, John Lewis, for example, had his skull badged in or knocked, hurt. Police fractured his skull on Edmund Pettus Bridge. I met John Lewis when I was 27. And it was one of the first pieces of education I had of what actually happened on Edmund Pettus Bridge. And since then, I've met many, many survivors of Bloody Sunday and survivors of the 3 marches that happened from Selma to Montgomery, because it took 3 marches for people to actually be able to successfully march from Selma to Montgomery for the right to vote. And Bloody Sunday was the first attempt to do that. And I say marches because there was only one successful march. The first 2 failed because law enforcement in Selma would not let that happen. This, my friends, the folks that died for my right to vote are my parents' generation. My parents' generation. This is not a long time ago. And yet this country keeps choosing the same thing. We tell ourselves that we are a democracy striving towards justice, but over and over again, when democracy and supremacy collide, we see which one wins. The Torah tells us, and many of you all know, tzedek tzedek tirdof, justice, justice you shall pursue, but you cannot pursue justice with an unjust system. You cannot build a democracy on the backs of people who have decided that you do not fully count. White supremacy does not need a hood. It never has. It needs a robe, and it has one. This is not the end of the story, my friends, because I still believe in the people, not the institutions. The people, the ones who remember, the ones who refuse to look away, and the ones who are paying attention. We do not get to mourn and go home. We have to stay, we have to fight, we have to organize, we have to vote. We do not fight to go back. We fight forward. We fight for a better democracy. I don't want to go back. I want something better, because more people than ever are saying out loud, we deserve better. We deserve a country that works for all of its people, not just a few and not just the powerful, but all of us. And just because the loudest voices in the room are saying something, that is not a majority. It is not the majority. This government is not listening to the will of the people. We must fight for something better. Like I said, we deserve better. We deserve a country that works for all its people, not just a few, not just the powerful, but all of us. That is worth fighting for. And that has always been worth fighting for. Remember, people died. People died for our right to vote. And we have every right to be able to vote the people in that we want and not have some party decide to hold power. We deserve better. Have a good night.